Welcome back to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Menti. On this Memorial Day weekend, we thought it appropriate to spend some time with former Navy helicopter pilot and current Congresswoman Mikie Sherrill, who tells us infrastructure is at the top of her priority list. But she says she won't vote for any infrastructure bill unless it includes two things. Congresswoman Sherrill, thank you so much for your time, as always. One of the things that's being negotiated right now between Republican and Democratic representatives in Washington and the White House is the infrastructure bill of utmost importance to New Jersey. There's so much in there that New Jerseyans want and need. Is there a red line, for a lack of a better term? Is there something in there you have to have or you can't vote for it?
There are a couple somethings in there that I have to have. First of all, the Gateway Tunnel project. That is something that is so critical to the economy of North Jersey, something I've been fighting for years now. And I'm very pleased with what I hear coming out of the White House on the Gateway Tunnel project. I've spoken to Secretary Buttigieg twice now on just this. And I know that the president's budget included several lines of funding that would go towards getting shovels in the ground on that project. So I'm very pleased about that. But something else I have to see in this infrastructure bill, and I brought this up several times to Secretary Buttigieg as well as the White House, is getting rid of or addressing the state and local tax deduction cap. We need that relief here. It was an unfair double taxation put on citizens throughout my district, and it simply has to be remedied. So as I tell people, you don't have to be a millionaire here in North Jersey to suffer from the impacts of the state and local tax deduction cap. It's really a harm to our middle class families.
Right. It seems like the Gateway Project will be in there in any version of it, whether it's a compromised version or the large version the White House wants. But the SALT cap seems like it's a tougher hill to climb at this point. There are many Democrats, even in the Senate, that aren't for that, including Bernie Sanders, who's head of the Budget Committee. Would you not vote for it at all? Are you hard and fast on this? You're not voting for the bill unless it includes an elimination or a reduction of the SALT cap?
Right. And I'm not the only one. This is a fairly widely held opinion in the House. We have a SALT caucus, which I helped to found. And we have over 30 members just in the caucus. And so given the slim margins we have and getting legislation passed, I think it's critical that we do address SALT. This was really an unfair tax on so many of our families. And people in New Jersey should not be taxed twice for the investments we make in critical things like the nation's best public school system, our infrastructure, our environmental programs. These are things that we care deeply about, and we shouldn't get punished for investing in them.
The New York Times did an editorial on the SALT cap fight, and they said that getting rid of the SALT cap is actually helping the rich. And why are they said, why are the Democrats helping people that make more money than most Americans? Because obviously if it's state and local taxes and you pay more state and local taxes, you benefit more if you get rid of the cap. What do you say to that?
I think it totally misunderstands and misrepresents what we use these state and local funds for and what we're investing in with them. So our state and local funds go to things, like I said, like our public school system, like our open spaces, like our investments in infrastructure, which helps daily commuters. These are things that are really critically important to middle class families and why so many people really want to live in some of our New Jersey towns so that they have access to these great services.
So just to be clear, I think you've already said this, but I just wanted to be real clear. You're not going to vote for any infrastructure bill unless it deals with the SALT cap.
That's right.
Let's move on now. There's talk about another round of stimulus checks, a fourth round of stimulus checks. Is that a possibility?
I think what we're looking for is making sure we do everything we can to get the economy back up and running. At this point, I think a lot of that is looking to invest in and making sure we have enough money to support our small businesses, making sure people can get back to work. I'm critically, as a mom of four, focused on some of our education programs, getting kids back into childcare, getting kids back into the classroom. I'm also looking at moving some of the unemployment, if we can craft that and an amendment to that, so we can move some of that into low-wage jobs to get people back in the workforce and not and to really incentivize getting back to work. So these are the critical things that I think I'm looking at. We can continue to talk about whether or not we need another round of stimulus checks. But right now, the main things I'm focused on are basically that list of things.
It's really interesting that you focused on getting people back into the workforce, because the White House has made it pretty plain that they don't believe that the extension of the unemployment benefits has anything to do with people not going back to work. And yet, when you talk to small businesses in New Jersey, that's the first thing they talk about. When you talk about restaurants at the Jersey Shore, they say there's a crisis. They cannot get people to go back. So you believe that it is the unemployment benefits that are keeping people from going back?
You know, I want to address everything I can to help our small businesses. And so, but what I think too many people are not taking into account, and when I look at the unemployment numbers, I see this, is the plight of working moms. And so while we can talk about some of the unemployment, how we move that into work, so we incentivize work, and I'm happy to do that. What I think we also need to address, and too many people seem to be not discussing this for my liking, is how we are going to get affordable childcare for people, how we're going to get kids back to in-person school, where are all the summer programs. So in my town, when I had really young kids, younger kids like kindergarten through second and preschool, I used daycare, but then when they were in school, I used some of our summer programs, our summer camp programs run by the school to help with childcare. And some of those aren't running this summer. So where are people going to find the childcare? And if you're a working mom, I have to tell you, these are really hard times. And we saw with the unemployment numbers how badly affected women were. And I think the numbers would have been far worse if we had taken into account all the women who weren't even looking for employment at this point. So I do think that narrative is getting a little bit lost by employers and government alike, in that, yes, I want to address getting people back into jobs in every way possible. And one of the critical pieces of that is childcare.
As much as the unemployment benefits, or do you think it needs to be a combination of both?
I think we need to do everything we can to address the pockets of people that need support getting back to work. And so, like I said, I'm happy to look at the unemployment and moving some of the unemployment money into low-wage jobs so we can incentivize getting back to work. I think that's a good idea. But I also want to make sure that there are moms that aren't at home because they want to be home. They're at home because they have little kids and they have no childcare. So I think people are underestimating what a critical problem that is for our working moms right now.
We talked about another round of stimulus checks possible, but some of the money from the last stimulus bill is still making its way to New Jersey.
So we have a lot of money that is making its way to New Jersey, as you put it, from the American Rescue Plan. We've been waiting for the guidelines from Treasury, pushing them weekly, if not twice a week, to get those regulations out. And now we see the money coming for our towns, 50,000 and below. And this is really going to be critical because so many of my mayors have shortfalls in their budget. The revenue over the last year has really not come in in the way they thought it would, given all of the people out of work and different problems related to the coronavirus pandemic. So they had made their budgets before the pandemic, and then they were receiving revenue shortfalls. Let this money coming in from the American Rescue Plan that I fought so hard for example, with Senator Menendez on the SMART Act, to get the state and local funding, what this will do will ensure that our mayors don't have to raise taxes, that they can not furlough any of our first responders or teachers or people in the mayor's office, so that we can continue to deliver services to all the people during this pandemic and as we get people back to work, but not raise taxes on our citizens at this tough time.
A bipartisan commission to look at what happened on January 6th. Do you think that's going to make it through the Senate?
I sure hope so. The other night was a kind of good news, bad news story. I will say that 35 members of the Republican Party voting on this bill, in some ways it was great to see some of my colleagues, some of the colleagues who I work with, who I serve on the Four Country Caucus with, veterans, etc. It was great to see them stepping up and really putting the country first. This is a bipartisan, independent commission. We negotiated it with John Katko, who was deputized to negotiate it by McCarthy, the minority leader of the House. So this was something in good faith. We entered into negotiations. We went back and forth. We got a bill that we really thought was a bipartisan bill. The same number of members from both sides of the aisle, independent commission outside of elected office, people who were really going to get to the bottom of how it was that a president of the United States incited an attack on members of Congress as we were certifying our democratic elections. It's critical. It's the worst attack on our nation's capital in our history. And so to see those members step up, I was very proud of them and happy to see that. But then to also see that 175 members of the Republican Party want to whitewash this, want to create false narratives around it, simply do not want to get to the bottom of how our democracy was attacked is really, really concerning to me. And I hope we see the numbers in the Senate to get it passed.
After the attack, you said that some Republican members you thought were helping the people that attacked the Capitol building. And you even said that they were taking them on tours in reconnaissance. I know that there's some people that want ethics violations against you because of that. But that could be investigated as part of a January 6th commission, right? And we'd find out if that was true with that commission.
Yeah, so unfortunately, again, Washington has become very partisan, and this ethics complaint is really without merit. It simply is, again, trying to cover up what happened on January 6th. I requested an investigation, as did over 30 of my colleagues, because they saw the same thing. What were these groups, these tour groups, doing inside the Capitol on January 5th, the day before the attacks, when the Capitol was closed to visitors? So we simply want to get to the bottom of that. I think, though, that again goes to why it's so important that we have this January 6th commission, so we can have an independent bipartisan commission investigating it. Get it out of Congress. Have this commission investigate it so the American people can see what happened that day and have faith in the investigators. We modeled it. This was parts of it are pieces of my legislation I put forth for the commission right after those events. And we modeled it on the September 11th commission because that was so helpful in getting answers and I think healing our nation.
I want to talk about one last thing because I know you served and I know you flew aircraft over the Middle East. The withdrawal from Afghanistan after all of these years. There are some people that say we should leave something behind just to protect our assets. And there is also reports coming out of Afghanistan that we have to destroy some equipment there because this is happening all too fast. Are you comfortable with the timeline? And are you comfortable with not leaving any American troops behind?
So, I think I agree. Well, I agree with President Biden's statement that this was not the timeline I would have created if we were starting from zero. But the former administration made commitments about American troops leaving. And, I think an American handshake should mean something. And I think that because our president had made that commitment, we had certain timelines that we had to act upon. And so President Biden, knowing that, created this timeline. It's not ideal. It's a very, believe it or not, very difficult and complex mission to remove troops and keep them safe, safely remove our troops from Afghanistan. Nobody wants the type of scenes that we saw from, say, Vietnam. So we're doing this in an orderly, thoughtful fashion. We can't leave weaponry in country that is going to fall into the wrong hands. So we're trying to remove as much as possible in a very safe, orderly way. It's not the ideal timeline, but it is the timeline that I think we had to work with given some previous commitments in the previous administration.
Well, Congresswoman, thank you for your service when you served as a naval pilot, and now thank you for your service now. And thanks for spending the time with us.
Well, as always, thanks for having me.
New Jersey Congresswoman Mikie Sherrill. Coming up next on Jersey Matters, a New Jersey school superintendent writes a letter to the governor imploring him to end the mask mandate in schools. That's next.